Well, hello there. It has been a day here. I don't know if it's been a day for you. My kids went back to school today, and you think you're going to get so much done, but you just sit around and kind of worry, pace around, and wonder if they're doing okay. But I hope you guys are doing well. Happy Thursday night. Happy day drinking. Tonight's guest, Vanessa Riley, her book Island Queen. Um, I have a gazillion questions and a lot of really it's a beautifully written book. But at the end of the book, there is this author's note that is a dissertation. And I have more questions about that dissertation. I mean, this is fascinating. I can't wait to find out about the research around this novel, and how hard that was. So we're going to get right to it. But before we get there, I'm going to read the back cover copy. And I don't know if you've seen this book around everywhere. Good Morning America, perhaps. But it's everywhere, and it should be. It's a beautiful book with a beautiful cover. So let's read this back cover copy. Born into slavery on the tiny Caribbean island of Montserrat, Doll bought her freedom and that of her sister and her mother from her Irish planter father, and built a legacy of wealth and power as an entrepreneur, merchant, hotelier, and planter that extended from the marketplaces and sugar plantations of Dominica and Barbados to a glittering luxury hotel in Jumeirah on the South American continent. Vanessa Riley's novel brings Doll to vivid life as she rises above the harsh realities of slavery and colonialism by working the system and leveraging the competing attentions of the men in her life. A restless shipping merchant, Joseph Thomas, a wealthy planter hiding a secret, John Cossevelt Sells, and a roguish naval captain who will later become King William the Fifth, Fourth, 10th, 9th. Sorry. The V is 5. Fourth, William IV of England, I think. I'll be corrected here. From the bustling port cities of the West Indies to the forbidden drawing rooms of London's elite, Island Queen is a sweeping epic of an adventurer and a survivor who answered to no one but herself as she rose to power and autonomy against all odds, defying rigid 18th century morality and the oppression of women as well as people of color. It is an unforgettable portrait of a true larger-than-life woman who made her mark on history. And let me tell you, all of that is true. Let's bring in Vanessa. Hello, Vanessa.
Hello, Molly. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining me tonight and for joining all of us. We had big plans to have a drink, but you're on deadline and
I feel like I'm cheating. I'm cheating on Starbucks.
And this was
my Starbucks
with Duncan.
I know.
Someone's going to come for you.
But it's their fault. They left me all alone. They canceled my Uber Eats order. I had to break down and get Duncan. So it's a shame on all the Starbucks, pox on their houses.
One of the worst and best things in the world is coffee being delivered to your house, isn't it? You're like, how did we get so low?
There are good points of the pandemic, and then there's some self-indulgent things with the pandemic that is like, you are just making me extra lazy. Thank you.
And I don't think I'm ever going back. I'm never going to be like,
is going to go back. We're too used to somebody else shopping my groceries. Oh my Lord, Jesus, yes.
Oh my gosh. No, it's true. We could talk about that for 20 minutes. I won't order my fruits and vegetables though. I have to.
You're my husband, right? I don't care. I will order it. I was like, these are my fruits and vegetables. You can go risk your life getting the perfect apple.
In the line. I like it when you order and at the end of it, they say you saved 2 hours of shopping of your life. And I'm like, yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. All right, Vanessa, enough of all of that.
Yes.
So we're going to get to the specific things about this book that I have excited questions about. But at the end of this book, you have an author's note that is like a dissertation about writing this novel.
Yes.
And in this dissertation, you reveal that there is no first-person source of information about Dolly. There's only
the second person, because there are other people's diaries who talk about Doll. Doll was actually famous during this time frame. So when I followed the rich man, King William IV, Prince Henry William, Prince Henry William. He has buddies that wrote a lot of books, and they mentioned this mulatto woman that he's infatuated with. He's with that mulatto woman. She's such a handsome girl. And literally after she later on in her life, they would say, I saw Doll Thomas in Glasgow with her 17 grandkids.
Wow.
In their letters. So Doll may not have left a personal record, but she left a lot of financial records, leases, wills. Her will is archived in the UK. And then once again, men talk a lot more than women.
In their dirty diaries.
And they write it down. Unfortunately, we're very fortunate to have Anne Frank's diary. Mm-hmm. Many women, Queen, I have a friend doing some research on Queen Victoria. Her daughter changed things in her diary because they didn't want the scandals getting out, right? So women are diary, if you can find them, so you're great. If they're still the true narrative, that's even better.
Yeah, but not a guaranteed thing.
It's not a guaranteed thing. And so once again, I'm always amazed that this woman was taken from us. She was famous during this time frame. Reduced to a paragraph here and a chapter in another book.
And like some dudes sort of like gratuitous, like sexifying her and not. So in this author's note, you talk about how you went through her birth records because it was very important for her to get her children's births recorded and on paper. And then you had some of these other diaries, but that doesn't give you any of her motivations or her thoughts or feelings about anything. And this was a wide and complicated life. So while doing this research and piecing together these things, what was the most surprising? What was the most, I have like 20 questions. What was the most surprising? What was the most difficult? Like what, like, can you just.
Yeah. So when you look at the pieces of people talking about her, she was known to be a very extraordinary conversationalist. People would come, politicians, rich people would come to her salons and her parlor in her grand hotels in the island of Demerara. In the colony of Demerara. And whenever visiting dignitaries, governors from the islands, the other colonies would come, they would come and have dinner at one of her hotels. I mean, that level of elegance blew my mind. The fact that she had a French chef at one point, that blew my mind. Because most of the stories that we see of this time period have a very negative story. It's most always the enslavement story. It is always a stripping of power. There's no agency, and you're lucky if you get freed, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have this woman who breaks all these stereotypes. Early in my career, one of the reasons I write my extensive I throw bibliography and things like that in there, because people didn't believe of these other facts, these other narratives. They are used to watching Pride and Prejudice, the 1995 version, 20 times.
Yeah.
They didn't see any Black people in there. And so there must not have been.
Must not have been.
So,
I mean, I was going to talk about this later, but you write historical romance novels, like sort of what you would traditionally call a romance novel. Island Queen certainly has some beautiful romance in it, but you particularly in this time period, those novels talk about these people making their fortunes in the West Indies, and this is the fortune they're making. Like on this situation is where their money's coming from, and it is. I'm reading it with fresh eyes, thinking, my gosh, like what a disservice has happened in the pop culture references to this time period.
Yeah, you go to Jane Austen's Mansfield, and the uncle has to keep going back to Antigua to straighten out his plantations because that's impacting his ability to just live high on the hog back in England. That was a thing. So you have all this money that is being made on the stolen labor, so to speak, in the islands. They call it the sugar trade to make it sound sweet and wonderful, but it's the imported slave labor coming from Africa to do indigo cotton, sugar, tea, coffee, all over the world, all of this enslavement labor, and that fuels the wealth and much of the power of the world. 80% of all of the ROI, or whatever you call the economic indicators, 80% is coming from the West Indies
Oh my gosh, at that time.
at that time.
Wow.
So
And we get none of those stories. I
we
mean,
get none of those stories.
Vanessa, that is insane.
I mean, I understand why people want to hide this, because it's a horrible time frame in a lot of respects, right? It's a horrible time frame. There is transferred guilt. But I firmly believe if we do not look at the past, we're destined to repeat it. History repeats itself so many times. And we are supposed to be evolved, and we are supposed to look at different things, and analyze it, and do better.
Mhm.
But if you take it away, you know, sometimes people look in the United States and they wonder why certain marginalized groups have it so hard, or they're not coming from the institutionalized wealth that puts people on different planes. They're not having these levels of access of education,
Right.
because where you start sometimes is an indicator where you're going to end up, because you've got to get the lucky breaks. I came from a very poor family, but we were farm family. My grandfather had 400 acres. He was a preacher in South Carolina, and he saved money and was smart about his investments, and he bought over 400 acres,
Wow.
um, these are stories we don't hear that much about. We once again focus on the pain, and my thing has always been, let's look at the past with clear eyes, but let's look for those stories that defy the odds. Let's look for
Mhm.
those victors. Let's look for those heroines who found their agency. And how did that look? Um, I like a diverse story. I like showing the intersection of people of different backgrounds. You get such a much richer story, particularly when
Mhm.
they come to an understanding of how the world is different, because you have such different people trying to coexist, trying to work, trying to find love, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the stories that excite me. And once again, we go back to this woman who was famous,
And rich.
rich,
Have
famous.
no-
Her will is in the is archived in the UK.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen to everybody.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Well, another part, in terms of looking at those sort of gray areas in what is, a situation, and the story has its roots in an awful injustice that is truly right and wrong. Like there's no way, no good people on both sides in this. Um, you manage to create little moments of redemption for people who were doing complex and complicated and wrong things. Dolly herself was a landowner and a slave owner, and you managed. I mean, tell me about that. Like writing that, and how you felt like attributing motive to something like that. Like, was it hard? Did you find information that backed up your feelings about it?
When you go through, it took Dolly about 16 years to be free. And she really becomes free because she learns how to huckster goods, where she goes and she's learning a trade. When you look at the records, I could see, because there's no such thing as a good slave owner. Let's just put it out there, right? There's no such thing. But the oral records that have been or written from the enslaved at that time frame say that she was a very fair owner, that she took care of her people, and then she provided paths so they could learn how to huckster, because the number of slaves that she ended up owning at the end of right before before the full abolition in 1833/1834, she didn't have that much land. These people weren't
Oh,
working the land. Why would you own that many people
if you weren't.
if you didn't have a bigger plan? And so I think she had a bigger plan. I think the women of the Entertainment Society, because the nature of Demerara, where they wanted everybody stained with the same sin, So if you were going to succeed, you had to do and conduct business just like everyone else. I found cases and mentions here and there of free Black men who were run out of business because they refused to have enslaved labor. Dolly, one of Dolly's son-in-laws, mixed race, Sephardic Jew. He did not, I couldn't find him owning anybody, but I found him subject to higher prices. I found him interest rates, all the things, all the tools that everybody in this society can use to make sure you go bankrupt. And he did. He ended up going bankrupt. So I think that's how I rationalize this piece, because it was so against everything she had done before. Yeah. It was heartbreaking to get to that piece. And I struggled with it. But as one who is a firm believer that history needs to be told, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I was not going to leave it. I actually had a friend of mine who said, why didn't you just leave that out? Yeah. And I'm like, no, you got to tell the whole story. As best as we possibly can, the whole story needs to be there. It is part of her evolution. It's part of, because I also have people who said, maybe we should have started right at the manumission. If you start right at manumissions in her story, you miss how big of a deal it is for her to be free. What does she overcome? Where, her background of all the complicated relationship with her family, her father, her half brother, et cetera, et cetera. You miss that journey that she's been on of becoming the woman she is and the things she looks at. So I believe in telling the full record, but I also want you to, I don't want to make her into a saint, because she was not a saint. I don't want to make her superwoman, which often happens when you get a marginalized character who does great things. They become superhuman. They do no wrong. They are sanctified and sanctified and all these sorts of things. And no, this was a real person who tried to do, I believe, the best that she could. But the fear of all of being re-enslaved was a real thing.
Oh, and it was felt particularly for her children. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the motive that you one of the many motives that you tied to her making this very impossible decision was, if I don't do this, my children will be back in slavery. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know how many children she ended up having, but her love for them, for her family, was the most important thing.
Exactly. Yeah. She did everything for her family. She wanted them to have a different experience. And so I tried to, when I looked at the records, and she's moving from Mazarat to Demerara. That's over 1,000 miles. And then you got the journey to Dominica, then you've got Grenada. I kept asking myself, why? Especially when she was doing so well in Dominica, why would you move? And so you look at the politics that's happening, you look at where her kids are and all these other things. And so to me, the story just came together and the motivations were there. By the time I sat down to write, I felt I knew her.
Yeah. I wondered about that her move to Grenada, where it felt like things were really about to be awful. I was like, oh, I had one of those like great reader moments where you're like, oh, Dolly, don't do it.
You should have taken them and gone to London. Go to London. You had a better
time. So in all of this, okay, wait, before I ask this question, I'm gonna ask this question. So you, what's the story about the sausage on the lawyer's table? Was that real? Was that true?
No, that's not real. That's not real. I read something about some other, because I'm a collector now. So as you start collecting, so that is a thing from somewhere. I can't identify where. I was like, oh, I got to use this somewhere.
It was for those of you who haven't read the book, and you should, it's this moment where she's like going to go and really start to make things official. Like she is going girded for battle to a lawyer's office, and to make sure she doesn't get robbed, she has this bag of sausages that she implicates was somebody's testicles. Which was pretty great. And I thought, oh my gosh, if that was real, stumbling across that story must have felt like a gold mine. So it must have felt like
Yeah. There's so many ridiculously things in history that you find that you just store them because it's like, I'm going to use this somewhere. I'm going to use this somewhere.
So in this story, she has a relationship with well, she has three men who are very important in her
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
And how do you view those men as building on her story or changing the course of her story? Because it is a wide variety. I mean, she has got a prince.
Yeah.
She has the man who helped her get her freedom, but wouldn't quite make her free. And then a man who was kind of terrible, not terrible, but not great at business, but loved her so completely and was so proud of her. So how do you tell me about how you created those relationships and used those to form the story?
Yeah. So whenever I construct a story like this for women, our history is our reproductive history.
Oh man.
So you
Oh,
lay
Vanessa.
out, yeah, you
Holy,
lay it out.
everybody write that down, man. Oh, Vanessa. Our history is our reproductive
It's our
history.
reproductive history because the choices of where she's having these children, who she puts on the birth certificate or birth records, etc., baptismal records. Those are huge things, and that's once again you know where she had to have been when she's writing these things. That once again, birth records can be about 4 to 6 months after the fact, et cetera, and those dates can change based on when they recorded it, who recorded it, what parish. They all have different records. But bottom line is, pretty much where she was, what baby she had, and who she's saying is the father.
Right.
And you just look at these things and you're like, there's a story here. And you start, weeding it down because now I know that she had to have left Demerara at this point because these kids are here in Dominica or these kids are here in Granada, et cetera, et cetera. Each man, I wanted to make sure they were different because I think she needed different things from them. With cells, that's where she gets this. To me, she can only get this level of opulence and grandeur because she doesn't get that from living in a hut, uh looking up at the big house, as a child. She knows that she wants more, but she doesn't get these level of grandeur and elegance and the because she was known, I mean, as a great dresser and all these different things. uh she's got to see that
Mm-hmm.
somewhere. She's not going to refining school at this moment in time. She's got to see that. And so the Sells was a partier. Sells was a politician, always having these big grand parties at his hermitage. And then you have Mr. Foden. He is teaching her, I think, that relationship, that kindly man, is teaching her more things. So I think that's where she gets her sharpening the business acumen that she got originally from her father, because I do believe, even though he was sorry, he,
He was. Oh my.
that he taught her initially because she actually perfected the business he was trying to do. He was trying to sell goods to the different colonies, et cetera, et cetera. He just wasn't good at it. She took those skills, focused in on huckstering, and really built the business that he tried to do. And then she expanded it to these luxury hotels and things like that. And so to me, that explains sales to me. One, that's the kind of hero guy to get her, because like I had to figure out, how does she go
Yeah.
from Mazerat to Demerara? And as soon as you get to Demerara, you see this close relationship, from eventually birth records, etc. But you see this with Sells, and then references to Mr. Foden, etc., etc. The housekeeping, wanting to do housekeeping and things like this. So you get this picture, at least in my head. That's where she gets this desire for eloquence. She learns etiquette. She learns all these things that she's going to be applying later on.
Mm-hmm.
When you move to the prince, she's at a ball. She's got to stand out because he's Prince William. And they said when he went to these balls, first of all, in Jamaica, he was a drunk. So in Jamaica, he's wrecking brothels, he's tearing up places, et cetera, all across because he's a sailor prince. So, I traced him because once again, unfortunately, men are more documented than women. And he's got lousy friends that wrote about him in letters and diaries and all these sorts of things. And they tell on him. They tell about his exploits in Jamaica. They tell about his exploits all across the Caribbean. But when he gets to Dominica, he's different. He's more settled. And they're always talking about him with this mulatto woman. I think, so I had to make that make sense. And for me, since men are always leaving, the one that came back just made so much sense.
Yeah, and that was a great. But what about Thomas?
Thomas, you see him on the original manumissions paperwork. So he was literally one of the guys helping her there. And there's something there, but their relationship is kind of spread out. You get a little bit in Dominica, you get some in Grenada. So once again, making the movements make sense for how she's building her businesses out and why she would go and these sorts of things. And really, Charlotte, was married to one of the younger Fidans from the Fidan Revolution. And I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a lot of connection. That's like, talk about, and this, that this woman's story isn't told when there's so many pieces of her reference. That's really astonishing. I want to talk really quickly about so she's a child at the very beginning. So I wanted to talk about how you handled this POV as a writer and as a person who had done all of this research, and you're creating this world. So she's very young, and there's a rebellion that's happening, and it's terrifying her. We know through her point of view that her father does love her mother, but it's not. He is sorry. How difficult was it for you to keep her a child in that point of view? Because she's clearly very smart. She's got an eye for what's going to happen next, but you've also got to explain a lot of stuff as a writer. And I found your balance in that to be really something. How tricky was that? Did you have to go through and edit a lot of then this, and then this?
Yes. So you write out what you want to accomplish in these scenes, and then you start taking away, because in her world, I could see this young girl who idolizes her father because he's bringing this magic, and not realizing your father lives up there. Well, she knows her father lives up in the big hut, the big owl house, and you're down here, and she can't really get it at that moment.
Yeah, she doesn't realize that it's how wrong it is. It's not right in her head, but it's not wrong. Exactly. Right? Like, she lives in that childish place.
And so keeping that childish place where she understands that she's got privileges that she sees other people that don't have. And then for someone as focused on her dreams, I was very intentional that you have to block out things. And so that's why she only looked at one side of the plantation.
Never to the left.
Never to the left. Because the left was all the things that said, you're doomed here. This is the punishment. These are all the harsh things, the sick houses and all that sort of stuff, that the actual working in the fields. Because one of the things I found is, Mass's children, even the ones that he did claim her. So people knew that Dolly and her sister were Massa Kerwin's kids. They didn't mess with them. So that's why they were able to go to town and come back. And actually they actually had days. This was wild, because I don't remember this in American history. They had days off.
Oh, wow. Because they were family, or as a rule?
Everybody in Montserrat had days off. So Saturday was a day off. Sunday was church. And then sometimes Wednesday or Tuesday, I think more so Wednesday, you could go to church in the evening.
Wow.
As an enslaved person. Now, Montserrat's is predominantly Catholic, but at that time they took all the Catholic churches away, so they had to meet in the woods. So the enslaved would be in the very back of the crowd during these church sessions. And to me, that's also wild, right? Everybody during this time frame wants freedom. Catholics want to be free of the oppression of the Protestants. America wants to be free of the British kings. France wants to be free of the French kings. And Haiti, or Santo Domingo, which is called during this time frame, wants to be free of everybody who wants a piece of them.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
All the other colonies, they want to be free. They're always changing hands. And for me, knowing the geopolitical scope of what's going on, because the world was really small during that time frame. You knew what was going on in the Americas. You knew what was
Right.
going on every other place. Um, that affects the customs, even how you become free. It changes every colony based on who is running the colony.
And I found that to be a really interesting and sort of fluid background piece for her life, because I'm, as I read it, I was feeling like, as a previously enslaved woman, a woman of color, a woman in general, an unmarried woman at some of the time, like, her position was very precarious, and the next wave of power, whoever was coming, could topple it all. And it was like, and she was Catholic. It was just like, give the government. Like, it was, and yeah, that was a really fascinating piece of it. But again, as a child and as a young woman who's like focused on getting her family free and then focused on getting her children free, it's a background piece.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I wonder if she was a man, if it wouldn't have been, because family was first, if a man wouldn't have been more, I found that to be super well handled on your part.
Thank you. And there are more women that were freed in the West Indies than in any other place.
How?
I do believe it has to do with the bugs. There are a lot of bugs in the West Indies, and men don't particularly want other men to get these bugs where these things lodge. They like go in the fat of the buttocks.
The chiggers you're talking about,
Chiggers,
yes?
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Isn't this?
Yeah. And so if you're beating on someone and being abusive, I'm pretty sure they're going to take it back when they have to get these chiggers out of you. It's the strangeness. It's a weird, but you find this more and more. And, the different colonies, in Santo Domingo, because it was French held, they had the Code Noirs. So if you had a baby by your enslaver and he claims it, you are instantly freed, and so is that child. So they're setting up the laws to coerce women into certain behaviors.
Well, so this was my next question, is because it becomes particularly, the entertainment society, like you start to create this network of women that are fascinating and strong and powerful and kind of getting shit done. And the law is having none of it. And they are coming after these women with everything. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So how did these women, you just answered that question, because they were free. There were more freed women than anywhere else. But what happened? How did this happen? How did they get out of it? Were they able to get out of it? Is that the next book you're writing and I should just be patient?
These women still, Lord Bathurst abolishes the tax, and that evil governor he's
rooted
out. So Demerara, I'm not sure what happens to Demerara after that. These women become assimilated. So you find, because they're wealthy. Once again, race and money, money trumps race. So these women end up being reassimilated into the majority culture. You'll find many of their descendants are reassimilated into majority culture. I was talking to one of Dorothy's descendants from Japan.
Wow.
Yep.
So your research, you have been able to contact family members. How much do they know about Dolly?
They are proud of Dorothy. So one in particular, I forget his name, but I actually met him on Facebook because I dressed up as Dorothy, and he DMs me one day. He's like, "You're dressing up like my great grandma."
That's amazing. That's amazing. So in a lot of ways, how long have you been working on this book?
I did research for 6 years, but I actually never thought I'd be able to write about her. So I was doing research to make sure all of my characters, who are these women with agency or doing things in my other books, this is my background.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally went to Historical Novel Society conference, and I met with Rachel Kahn, William Morrow, And I'm pitching the story, and I do what, in my head, how to tell the story. Well, we can tell, Prince William's Caribbean Mistress, kind of story, right? She's like, we've heard enough of him. I was like, oh, okay. Well, we can do, so we can do the two Dorothys, because, there's Dorothea Bland and Dorothy Kerwin Thomas, the two mistresses. She's like, no, we heard enough of her. I want this story. And so it was just amazing. She saw it. And the thing is, I knew it, but I didn't think that traditional publishing was ready to singularly focus on a woman of color during this time frame, showing just breaking all these different stereotypes. I didn't think the world was ready for it. Thank you, world, for proving me wrong.
I mean, and I mean, are they ever like Good Morning America? You were on Good Morning America.
Yes.
How did that happen? You must have just freaked out. I mean, you must have freaked out when that beautiful cover arrived. Like the stars aligned a bit. Like you wrote a beautiful book. Tell me about that.
The cover was I call it one of the COVID miracles. Originally William Morrow was looking to do a photo shoot, and they had talked to some women from Montserrat, and they had some beautiful women, and etc. And then COVID happened, and there were no more going into studios, and so we changed directions to do a drawing. And they had pulled artists, and so this one artist, Tanya Engel from Michigan, they gave her the story, gave her the idea, and she started coming back with these images. And when she got on this one, it was picture perfect. To me, that's Dorothy. It shows resilience, her strength, everything. She's absolutely amazing.
There's a cover behind you. Sorry, it's behind you on your bookshelf.
Oh. I usually have one or two laying around. So yeah. So anyway. So
I mean,
just look at that. You see it in the eyes. You see everything about this woman. I just love it.
And then Good Morning America. Tell us about that.
So, it's as all these books are being pitched to, for the Celebrity Book Club endorsements. It's an exciting time. And I think it was after the review in the New York Times, which was a very glowing review on the book, they get a call, and then they call me, and they're like, Good Morning America's picked you as a buzz pick, and we need you to shoot some video. And what?
I'm with you until me shooting a video.
Okay. All right. So we're like, okay, now where are we gonna shoot? So I'm calling my agent up, like, where should we shoot this video? Because I was thinking, too many people have seen the wonderful bookcases, etc. So we go outside, in the porch, this big old southern porch it's just perfect, right?
It's beautiful.
It's 1,000,000 degrees out on my southern porch during the time frame. So it was fun. My hairstylist came out. She's, touching up makeup, the hair and all that sort of stuff. And, 400 takes later, we get it.
You did. Oh my gosh. Vanessa, this is so exciting. Are you please tell me that the next thing you're working on is this entertainment society, these women?
Actually, no, but I may dip back in later.
Oh, them, they're rich. What are you working on right now?
It's called Sister Mother Warrior, the two women who shaped the Haitian Revolution.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So Victoria Montu, also known as Abadura Toya, is a Dahomey warrior who was captured and brought to Santo Domingo, which is Haiti. She ends up raising Dessalines. Jean-Jacques Dessalines is the man who, after Toussaint Louverture is captured by the French and tortured, everyone had surrendered to the French, but Napoleon was determined to make the island become re-enslaved. And so between his brother-in-law Leclerc and a guy named Rochambeau, who we kind of know his daddy and we think his daddy's cool, this boy Rochambeau is crazy.
Really?
They hate Black folks, and they decided that if you were over age 12, you had to be killed because you would never accept enslavement again. So there's mass executions on Santo Domingo and all
Oh
this sort
my
of
God.
stuff. And Dessalines is able to utilize all of the furor that's growing to regather the forces, get even the Taino people from up in the mountains to come down and join his army, and he's able to overthrow the French that are here in Santo Domingo. Dessalines is like one of the military geniuses when they're looking back at his battle plans and his strategies. And he gets all of this from Toya, the Dahomey warrior.
Oh my gosh. So is writing this book different? Is there more information about her? Are you finding it? Or, I mean, obviously, of course not.
Of course not. You get snippets here. So that's one woman. And then you have Mary Claire Bonner. Mary Claire is his wife. Mary Claire actually goes into the middle of the battlefield and preaches to the people on the side, because apparently people come out to watch the fights, preaching down the side that they should all come in and join and help feed the poor and bandage up everybody who's gotten injured. So they literally at times would stop the war for her and her mule train to come in and bandage up folks and feed people. And that's Dessalines' wife. So you have war and peace on both shoulders. And they shape the Haitian Revolution.
Vanessa, it must feel absolutely, I cannot imagine how you must feel being able to write these stories. Being able to publish and write these stories right now. Like, it's got to feel pretty.
It feels amazing because, once again, I didn't think that we would get to this point. And the world has changed, and people are in position where they want to see a fuller narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And they're excited about, seeing different history represented in a different way.
All the stories we've never heard.
There's something about when a woman tells a story about another woman, or when a Black woman is telling a story about Black women, that you get this extra richness. At least in my opinion, there's an extra richness because the writer is feeling it. They're feeling it when they're writing it, and it comes out on the paper. And you get just different perspectives. Because, like I said, you alluded to this. I have read books that try to make it sound as if Dorothy and her first two kids were consensual. They called it a relationship.
Yeah.
And I threw books.
Not a relationship.
Books on the side. I threw them because there's nothing about this that could ever be consensual unless you're trying to say she's some depraved, morally bankrupt 12-year-old.
It's very insulting to call this consensual. Yeah, for sure. So. Yeah, there is I don't know, there's some real magic in these books, and I'm so excited that you're telling them. I can't. Does the next? Oh, I'm sorry, you did say the title. Could you repeat it?
Mother, Sister, Warrior.
Love it. Amazing. I can't wait for it. Any idea when there's a publication date?
Currently slotted for the summer of 22. So we'll see, because they're always looking where's the best place to put these. Yeah. And so we'll see. But
Oh, Vanessa, I cannot wait to read it. Thank you so much for taking the time. I could talk to you for another hour. This is a fascinating story, and your efforts to bring it to the world are really exciting and interesting. So thank you very much.
No problem. And thanks for having me.
Everybody out there, stay safe, read a book, have a drink, get the vaccine. Good night, guys. And have a coffee.